Okay, ladies and gents, we've got Christian Harbeck. I mean, Chris, I've known you for how many years?
Yeah.
50 years, eh?
It's now been 4 years plus. Let's forget about this. This shit happened that started last year.
Exactly.
Let's exclude that one because that has taken really a lot of time from so many people. Everybody here? Everybody ready?
Yes.
Okay, everybody had a nice dinner?
Yes.
Everybody had some wine? I'm sorry, I had some. Sorry. So thank you for this opportunity tonight. I'm here in a capacity as myself as a property investor. That middle thing in the middle there is something that I'm going to talk about. And I don't really add it too often to my title, which is entrepreneur and an action coach. So I'm a franchise partner with a global group called Action Coach, and I'm a business coach. But I actually started my journey in 2017 when I met Andrew and I took a course on a notorious weekend at the... What's it called?
Gilliesburg or something.
No, it was here at the top tree or triple tree.
That is yonks ago.
That's yonks ago.
I was like 22.
Oh, yeah. So that weekend when I completed my course, the following Monday, I implemented the strategies that Andrew has shared that weekend. By the following Sunday, I bought a house.
Cha-ching.
Cha-ching. So did I buy it with my own money? I used someone else's money. So just to give you some numbers, I borrowed 2.95 million rand. I used another 400,000 rand to put into the property, and I sold it for 4 million rand. Irrespective of what came out, it sounds lovely, but don't forget about taxes, capital gains, and all kinds of other stuff. And I did not really think about that because I did not listen to my coach. So I was penalized. So at the end of the day, from that lovely chunk that came out of this deal, I paid a shitload of taxes, personally. But it was still a very good deal because I did not listen to my coach. So how important is it to listen to your coach? Very important. So just...
Then we just click the laptop and the thing will wake up.
Oh, okay.
It's an Apple thing.
It's an Apple thing. It vibrates. Is it normal? So I'm originally from Namibia, from Windhoek. I was born to German parents. I went to German school there. I moved here in 1997. I had 170 Namibian dollars in my pocket, and I drove a Avis rent-a-car from Windhoek to Cape Town, which I delivered here. Still paid for my own fuel, had a friend in there, had a suitcase. And this is when my journey started. At 23 years old, I was actually, I thought it was a good idea to become a, let's call it self-employed individual. And it was a tough journey through my life. I've always been self-employed and being not yet an entrepreneur, but always doing stuff on my own. I have been in all of these industries, as you can see here. My passion is property and action coaching. So I'm a certified business coach, and with that I say certified. I'm not someone who just suddenly overnight thought of, I want to be a coach now, and then, you know, I'm a dancing coach, and wipe your ass coach, and that kind of stuff. I'm a certified business coach. So I assist business owners to reach their dreams and goals through building truly profitable enterprises that work without them by choice. Just to really look at something that I am a firm believer in, which is called the point of power. There's a lot of stuff happening in bed. So much stuff is happening in the blame, excuse, and denial. I don't know if anybody knows who's in bed all day. Maybe you catch yourself. We are all humans. We are sometimes in bed, where we are really finding all the excuses, we're in complete denial, and we always blame everything and everybody else. COVID is no longer an excuse. Government is not an excuse because government is not in your household. They might be, other stuff around it, but forget about that stuff. Macro economies or macro events don't affect you and your business, but rather stay in the OR. Be accountable, take ownership, and be responsible of your choices and decisions in your life. And when you are in that top, you are basically powerful. That's an excuse. If you're in bed, you are powerless. Nothing will ever happen when you lie in bed. Nothing. There's nothing that will fall in your lap and suddenly there's this pot of gold. It will not happen. Take a decision and be in the OR and be powerful, but also when it comes to ownership, take extreme ownership. I've got a wristband here. This is my motto for this year. Extreme ownership. If I don't like my bank account the way it looks like, I need to look myself in the mirror and say, okay, what am I doing to change it? Because the government is not their fault. It's not the neighbor's dog who's barking the whole time. Definitely not. It's my fault. The entrepreneurial ladder. And that's why I've been mentioning this entrepreneur title. Is it really, am I really an entrepreneur? And we all know we start at a point which we call the student life. We start somewhere, we are the student. It starts at school, starts with your parents, wherever that is, we are a student, and we hopefully will be a student of life as we go along. But this is where we start as the entrepreneur. Somewhere we get this little step ladder. Okay, we're a student, now we start learning. As a kid, as a teenager, as an adult. The next point where you normally go through your entrepreneurial journey or through your life, you become an employee. You work for someone and you shovel. And someone tells you how to do it, how fast, and you get paid for it. Now one day you think, I think I can shovel better than this guy is actually telling me. And you become self-employed. Now you actually are a person who does self. Again, you shovel. And again, you actually taking on more challenges than before. Because you are self-employed. You do self-shoveling, you do self-payments, self-clients and how you get them, self-this, self-that. And then this title of self-employment is suddenly not that grand as people think of it. And that's the crux of the whole scenario of when you want to become a business owner. And by my own learnings, I thought, man, I'm going to be sitting on the beach, drinking pina coladas, having all the time in the world, being this self-employed guy. Hey, this lesson there. And it still teaches me every day. It's really, really tough being self-employed. You might have a name on a company or a document, but you still do everything self. So why suddenly, or where does this manager suddenly come in? Doesn't a manager normally go before a self-employed person? No. Now you actually start learning how to manage your business. You manage it by delegation. You manage it by putting systems and strategies in place, methodologies. You possibly look at YouTube videos on how to educate yourself to become better. How you educate yourself to become a better property investor. So manager is actually the next point. It's totally upside down as a lot of business owners perceive it. But now suddenly you actually become a business owner. When systems work in your business, and you can actually sit on the chair and you can say, guys, I'm taking a bit of a break for the next 2 to 3 months. Good luck with the business. And you sit on the beach, you don't drink pina coladas, but you get some information, you get some feedback. You are now an owner. But does it really set you free? Does it really give you the opportunity to be an entrepreneur? And this is the disconnect between having a title of an entrepreneur and really being an entrepreneur. So be mindful, and sometimes I don't always get the nicest feedback from it, but it is something that I had to learn. To be an owner, a business owner, is still you are in your business. And hopefully you are working on the principles which we call Mrs. Roy. Are you getting a market-related salary? And is your business giving you a return on investment? Same in business as in property. Because a property should actually set you free. Which takes you to the point of, where do you actually get freedom from whatever you invest, the time, the energy? Where does it come from? It's when you actually officially start investing. And this is where it is, property. Shares, and if you like, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and you've seen your ass the last couple of weeks. But where do you go and invest? And does this investment pay you the returns that you would like to actually receive from that investment? So the question you need to ask yourself, are you really an investor in this journey? And you can take it as a business owner, you can take it as a property investor, but are you really an investor? And I know some of you are, and some of you are on the right path to get there, but we need to really, to become free, financially free, we need to invest in a vessel that will set us free one day. And set us free to a point is we have a business that gives us a return. That return is invested. That investment is paid off. Once the investment is paid off, then you buy your Range Rover. Not before. Suddenly you have R1 million in your bank account. Ooh, this is Range Rover. Hey, lekker, man. And suddenly COVID comes. Oh, there's this little cucky thing in your underpants. And you sell your Range Rover. That's what happens. Like, rich people are there for a reason, and they're rich for a reason because they have invested in something. When shit hits the fan, stuff still goes on. This is when you have finally arrived at the level of entrepreneurship. An entrepreneur is someone who can basically say, you know what, I'm here tonight talking to you. I'm not at the level there yet because I'm honest about it. Because if I take my investments, they don't pay enough for me yet so that I can actually say, okay, my 250,000 Rand that I want to actually have as whatever, slush fund or whatever cash I want to have on a monthly basis, it's not doing that yet. So think about it this way. If you would have to retire, you would have to write yourself on your retirement wish that you would like to receive. Let's say you want 250,000 Rand a month. That's what you want to retire on. You have to write yourself 300 to 400 checks into the future of 250,000 Rand. I'll calculate that. We as humans are becoming older by the day. So we used to only live up until, in the beginning of the century, up until the 50s. And now we actually close and further living beyond 100. Hey, you want to retire at 65. And you want to live another 35 years on what? That comes from property investments. The brick and mortar that you're investing in. Invest in properties. And you need to live, breathe by it. It's going to take a while until you get there. Usain Bolt made 119 million Rand in 115 seconds of running. $119 million on 115 seconds of running. But everybody forgets that it took him 20 years to get there. Now, who's laughing to the bank now? You continue through the Property Academy. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was valuable. Yes. If there's any questions, anybody wants to, raise your hand.
So, in terms of action coaching, you coach people in any business.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter the sector.
Doesn't matter. I can tell you now, every business worldwide on the planet works the same.
And you work with investors at any level.
And investors any level.
Cha-ching.
Jane.
Let's give Christian a massive round. The thing I love about this is, and I think Michael said it or you said it, it's not just about investing in property, it's the entrepreneurial spirit around it. Creating businesses to support the property as well. I've had so many clients like Michael in Asphalt talking about his property. He's now built a letting business to support his portfolio, but he's building a book of other people's properties. And every property he takes on, the asset value goes up. And so it's building the businesses around the property, which is why I love property. Cha-ching?
Cha-ching!
One more round of applause. There we go. Now the exciting part. Are you all fresh? Everyone just stand up for me very quickly. Just spin 360 degrees. Turn to someone you don't know. Turn to someone you don't know. Introduce yourself and ask them for a million rand. And then take a seat. Okay, now it's time. Okay, it's time for the most exciting part of the evening, which is all about tax and asset protection and what vehicles to use. And I know there'll be loads of questions, so can you give it up and a massive round of applause for Shilly Boy and Bruno Samar from Instagram. Okay, over to you guys. No pressure, eh?
Yeah. So that's our job to entertain the whole. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here. Before I start, I just want to find out how many of you have seen us do talks already. Thank you. I hope so much. All right. And then the second question, by show of hands, does anyone here own property at the moment? All right, a good number, right? But still a good number of guys that are still getting in. So we normally divide this talk into two. So there's the aspiring investor, and then there's the existing investor and how he's going to deal with certain issues that may have arisen, or maybe he didn't have the right education and how he fixed that. We're going to focus predominantly on the aspiring investor because the principles remain the same. Fixing the issues that may have arisen is always something we can do afterwards. We can always have a chat about it and try to get those things resolved. But before we start, just a quick introduction. So my name is Bruno Simel. I'm a specialist property attorney. I'm based out of Sandton in Joburg. I've been doing this for about 15 years. My firm specializes in commercial and litigation in the property sphere. So what does this mean? We put contracts together. We do evictions. We do conveyancing, that sort of thing. What we're here to speak about tonight is actually Intergen. So I'm a co-founder of Intergen, that's my business partner. Intergen is a tax and legal consultancy. So that means we assist people becoming tax efficient, tax planning, and we do structuring and restructuring.
I thought you were going to introduce me. It's so not kind. Okay, guys, my name is Shilly Boy Mutiba, as he already briefly introduced me. I'm also a co-founder of Intergen. I'm a CA by background. I'm currently doing my master's in international tax. I don't even know how I got myself into that. That's the story for another day. So now, tonight, we're going to be speaking about structures. I hear many people saying that they want to talk about tax, saving tax, others they don't want to pay SARS. I'm like, how are we really going to have roads if someone is not going to pay tax? Like, I mean, how are we going to have hospitals if someone doesn't want to pay tax? But yeah, one thing that I want to gauge, right? When you think of SARS, what comes to your mind? Oh wow, that's quite heavy. What emotions comes out of you?
No, you don't want to go there.
Wow, I got the answer. So now, here's the thing. What if I told you that SARS actually is not what you made it to be? Would you believe me?
I would.
Oh, at least there's one. Huh? Would you believe me? One of the reasons why we've got what you call tax court. He's an attorney, he briefs the advocates, I sit behind the scene, I interpret legislations, and I tell with this. right? And then he briefed the advocate, right? Application of law. When SARS approaches you with that letter that is scary, and they tell you that you've got within 14 days to pay them, look at it and call me. I'll tell him, he'll tell the advocate. Right? You object. You've got a right. You've got a right. Application of law into investment structures. That's what I was saying to the gentleman there to say, I'll be interested to know why you end up paying so much money. Because what we do, we default to that. Right? We default to that. The moment you get there, you're like, oh, I need to pay and get over it. And you get these feelings that he doesn't want to share. I know. But here's the thing. What I want to do is to create awareness. To say, listen, apply the law. Make the law your friend. SARS is not who you think he is. SARS can sit down with you and you can have a discussion upon that letter that is so scary. Because they always write it. I've had one of the clients actually about a week before last week. She was calling me from Netherlands. One of the guys who left with NASPAS is international tax. Stopped taking up her treaties. She's been taxed in Netherlands and she's been taxed in South Africa because she has a true apartment in Bristol. Right? She got a letter, she ran, she paid. Right? She never spoke to me. I said, you should have objected. Right? She should have even applied international tax treaty. Those are advanced. Foreign credit, those who invest in UK will have a conversation. But what you need to take out of this is about application of law in investment structure. Put that at the back of your mind that you need to apply law. And you don't have to be an expert. That's why you've got the likes of Bruno and myself.
And it's interesting, it's a very interesting concept because again with the laws, a lot of us complain about legislation. We look at National Credit Act, we look at Consumer Protection Act, we look at the taxation laws, and we've all got an opinion on this, how bad it is. Remember, a lot of these laws are brought into place for some reason or another. There's always two sides to a coin. It doesn't work for you, but it's there for somebody else. You have to approach it from that perspective. So what gives you the competitive advantage is not sitting and moaning and bitching about it. It's actually looking at it and going, well, they've drafted it in order to close certain loopholes. So within this legitimate structure, there's things that we can do. There's education we can receive in order to benefit. Exploit it. Exploiting is not really the right word, but you take advantage of your knowledge and apply it. And that's where you actually become friends with SARS, because there's certain things there that SARS allows. Don't be the guy that doesn't use it. Rather be the guy that takes that information and puts it to good use.
Cool. Aspiring investors. Someone asked me, at what level are you as a property investor, Jonathan? Was a quite tough question because I'm like, I'm still an aspiring investor. If you were to imagine an aspiring, what? Aspiring investor, right? What comes in your mind? You're one of them, bro. You told me, I'm picking you. Right? You might be going into marriage, or you're married, or you're married and you're going to get married and you've got kids from previous marriage, or for that matter, you're one of those who are excited about marrying two husbands. And you are already married in community of property, and you're thinking of creating wealth through property investment. And the question is, how to preserve your wealth? How do you structure your wealth? Because should you die, that takes implications. Should you divorce because you're not interested in that Korean tree? You don't want to follow the South Pacific Oceans people, because it's already it's the type of marriage that is existing. But that's reality. Or for that matter, you don't even have a will, and you get incapacitated tomorrow. How do we save you from tax? Those are some of the variables. I'm just throwing you some of the examples, but those are certain variables that you need to think about before you even go to Andrew about going in to be a property investor. It's a reality. Because how you structure fundamentally, how you're going to structure your property investment, your portfolio, your wealth, it's very, very important to answer these variables. I'm not saying answer them by yourself. Come to me, whisper in my ear, I'll whisper to you. It's as simple as that. That's why Andrew spoke about ecosystem. What is the point of ecosystem if you can't leverage? You don't have to be an expert. Just leverage. Look at the ecosystem and say, who exists in this? But then who made me aware of the variables that exist as an aspirant? But then these variables comes with the risk, by the way. Indicator, potential risk. How do I address risk? How do I put the safeguards? Auditors, whoever trained as an auditor will tell you that. What are the safeguards? Internal controls, effectiveness of, that's a fancy word of it. But then these are potential risks, which I think Bruno is the best person. Legal people are always more fluid up and they know how to structure even agreements in such a way that they can even mitigate the risk. Do you understand?
They brainwash you into risk assessment in law school. So this is pretty much it. It's looking at worst case scenario and trying to figure out how to get it sorted out, how to mitigate. So out of interest, is anyone, or rather, if you don't want to, it's perfectly fine, but there's normally a couple of people in the room that are married in community or property, so I don't want to pick on anyone, but I can assure you that that's maybe about 20-30% of people are.
They're lucky if I know what's on the people.
Yeah. No, I learned from last week. Wait, so put up your hands. No, come on. And like one guy at the back puts up his hand, and now he got picked on for the rest of the evening. So it's fine. But I can assure you there's people here that are married in community or property. It's not that it's wrong, right? In fact, depending on when you got married, there was a stage where that was the acceptable norm. As of late, some people still equate being married in community or property to what is socially acceptable or like religiously acceptable. Like, we don't worry about finances. Like, we're one now. Me and you, we're together forever. It's love. Yeah, exactly. It's love. Now, the truth is, though, that I think that lack of specific understanding is where the problem comes in. You can actually get married with an anti-nuptial contract. You can mimic getting married in community or property to a certain degree. Why would you want to do that? Because the stark difference between being married in community and out of community is not the relationship between the two of you. That you can sort out in the contract. It's your relationship with the world.
Yes.
Because being married in community or property means all your assets are all together in one pool. Which means that if you get into trouble, your spouse gets into trouble, your spouse, vice versa, right? Now you're exposing somebody else. So what you do when you get married out of community is you actually keep your estate separate. And that's the goal. So this type of estate planning, so we're not even going so far now as to discuss, oh, get a trust, oh, get a company. That comes later. Like, let's start at fundamental level. How are you married? How can we fix that? Can you fix it? Yes, you can. Fix it before you start investing in property. Because once you start investing, irrespective of how you invest, you sign that suretyship. You're telling the bank that you're binding yourself. You're also binding your spouse.
Yes.
Now to get out of that and suddenly go to the bank and say, I'm changing my marital regime. I want to now be married out of community or property. The bank's going to say, no. I don't want to lose that person as security, so I'm not going to consent. And then you have to make a whole bunch of concessions to try and get that change. So first and foremost, start thinking along those lines. So the risks that we start looking at. If you look at all these risks, they all typically fall within one of three categories. So you're either looking at tax. Now it's clear from what everyone said earlier that no one likes paying tax. So that's the first thing. So why would you want to focus on this? Because you want to pay as little tax as possible. You want to protect your assets as much as possible. Now, fundamentally, you start looking at marital regimes. Let's say you've got that sorted out and you're good. So the next step is making sure that your businesses don't impact you, that your businesses are kept separate, that one way or another you don't expose yourself to your business and vice versa. So it's a business question. The lady from Uber and obviously Paul from Tough, they speak about financing. There's more to financing. And I mean, they'll attest to this. There's more to financing than simply going with a great property and saying, give me money. The reality is you also need to get your structures in place because they look at the structures. So as Paul mentioned, as a prerequisite, they normally require that the person has a company. So that's already a structuring thing that you start looking at. With general financing, you also find that if you apply for a bond in your personal name, you start impacting your affordability. So you'd want the structure in order to be able to leverage and buy more properties through the structure without impacting your affordability. So these all tend to center around these three basic principles.
Before you even go there, I would have expected someone to say, how is SARS taking 50% of my wealth?
You know we have a slide dedicated.
I know.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I was just highlighting it. I'm not going to say it.
So those are the three principles we tend to focus on. It's asset protection, tax efficiency, and financing optimization. In order to be able to control these, this is when we bring the structures into play. So you don't start by asking what structure you want. You start by looking at those three principles and deciding which are important to you and how you want to weigh them in the bigger scheme of things. Because it's really about finding the equilibrium for your personal circumstances. There is no one size fits all. I can promise this right now. Those guys out there selling cookie cutter products aren't actually taking care of your interests. They're taking care of their own. Everyone has their own specific set of requirements, and that's where the individual structures kick in. So we don't focus on the outside ring. We focus on these three principles first. Then we start chatting about that outside ring. Now I focus on asset protection being a lawyer, then he's going to focus on tax efficiency. So just quickly touching on the asset protection, we had the conversation already about demerging community of property, so I'm not going to go through that again.
No, I mean, I'm just interested in things that are more relevant, things that are more topical. I like gossips. So, this Interstate Succession Act in South Africa, basically meaning that you die without a valid will. It's one of those acts in South Africa that's so evolving that it's nobody. There's always court case around this act because people fight over wealth. We've seen in one of the tribes recently that even in a will that has been questioned, it's a reality.
Yes.
Imagine in a situation where you dive in without a will, because will, remember when you talk of structure, when you talk of how do I pay less tax, you also need to look at things from 360 degrees point of view. You don't just only ring fence things, right? And one of the things that we also, most of people take lightly, it's a will, which goes hand in hand with how you structure, even how you invest, whether it's a trust, whether it's companies, those things come together. Because if you don't, you're putting yourself here, and then you are leaving a wall for interpretation to the courts of law. That's the reality. So I just wanted to highlight it. Right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, perfect. Yeah. So, insofar as succession is concerned, maybe to touch on that, interstate succession, huge nightmare. And now you're just looking at our general system. Now we all know that, and I mean, this isn't bashing government, but the reality is a lot of stuff that we leave in government's hands does carry some sort of issue, delay, inefficiencies. You die interstate, you're basically asking the master to organize and fix up your estate according to legislation. It means things get frozen for a couple of years before they get sorted out. The master can also now go out and appoint the right executor, which isn't always necessarily what you had in mind. And it's not always the right answer. And if people start fighting over who should get what, now you've got the master that you seem to be in, and that takes time. The will is just that. You dictate what's going to happen. And I mean, does that not make life easier? Because a lot of us in this room speak about creating wealth, for our kids, for the generations to come. If you don't get this right, that's meaningless. Because this is just going to cause such a headache that your kids are actually going to suffer trauma because of it. So at the very basic level, like, get your will in order. It's also not it's not the hardest thing to do. Just basic, well, I leave all my things to you.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
I'm blessed.
Oh, yes.
Can I digress? because of not even having that valid will, there's a story, or rather a life case. Unfortunately, the husband is incapacitated and he didn't have a will. It's a reality. Married in community of property, and they've got wealth, property investors of knowledge, right? The husband has kids before this marriage. Yeah. And this is a reality, guys, that we're exposed to as intelligent. And husband has kids before this marriage, the wife has kids before this marriage, and they both don't have kids together. Now, families don't get along, right? We're talking about wealth here. This is not a joke, it's a wealth. Now, what happens if the husband passes away? And there's no will, by the way, remember. There's no will. It doesn't exist. He incapacitated, so he can't stand in front of court now and write a will. He can't sign because one of the requirements, basic requirements in the Wills Act is that you need to be in a sound mind for you. Now I'm sounding like a lawyer because I hang around running it off. So now, what's going to happen? They're going to fight. Those are family feuds. Now this is where master, he's talking about the master interfering and having to appoint an executor. By the way, master will call it 18 and this. That's one of the processes, one of the stage. They call here, then they interview the stakeholders, the families, the relevant interested parties. Can you imagine what kind of a meeting is going to be? Yeah, things will be thrown. But then during that time, what happened to wealth? It's frozen. What happened to the properties that are not unattended? Just because you did not have a will, you didn't have a structures. Imagine if you had trusts, you had companies, and you've got independent trustees, you've got sound corporate governance, non-executive directors looking after your wealth. They can argue as much as they want. We'll just open the law and say, we are in charge as independent trustees of this investment structure. And for that matter, one of the clients actually recently asked for what we call letter of wishes. In cases where you're incapacitated, then we'll even act in guidance because of what we call letter of wishes. As much as it's not a legally binding agreement, but it helps. And that's part of structuring, that's part of preserving the wealth. And that's part of minimizing the tax unnecessary that you're going to pay that way. It's that's there if you don't want to pay SARS. When SARS comes in, you just open all these things and you minimize your taxes. Anyway, I can speak for him.
So up until now, we've been discussing a lot of family issues, right? So it's, how are you married? How do you want to leave your wealth to the next generation? Kids, wives, that sort of thing. So now let's take it up a notch. Let's bring it into why we're here tonight. We all want to invest in properties. We want to make money. We want passive income, right? Now, why is now structuring a big part of this? You sorted out your personal things, and now you're going to go into this property investment. You've got your marriage sorted. You've got your will, and now what? Right? Now, 3 facets to asset protection, and this is very important, right? So the first facet is protecting yourself from your business. When you run a business, you want to avoid getting yourself in your personal capacity into a lot of trouble. So let's say you're running a development, you're interacting with contractors, and you're engaging in services and something goes wrong. You want the company to be responsible for that. You don't want to be personally responsible for that. So that's why you'd want to separate yourself from your business in order to protect yourself. All right, the second facet, though, is protecting your business from yourself. Because that's also important, right? Now, you're going through personal issues, something happens. There's a lot of things that happen from a legal perspective that you can't hide behind the company. If you get into a fight on the street for some reason, right, and it's assault charges, that's you. There's no company that will be liable for that. You're driving a car and you land up in an accident, that's typically you. You can't hide behind the company to protect you. There's a lot of liabilities that you can't hide behind structuring. And so what do you want to do? You want to move this business, you want to have this business independent. So if anything does happen to you, the business continues. So that's the second facet of asset protection. The last one, and very, very important, people tend to forget this, is you want to protect your businesses from each other, right? You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, what's the value of that? Right? You protect yourself, sure, it's a separate entity, but now your businesses, you've got an inner city development taking place. You've also got a nice little quiet suburban multi-let or single buy-to-let. Why would you want these in the same portfolio? Because if something goes wrong in that one, then you're exposing this one or vice versa. So you want to be able to structure it logically. It's not a question of overstructuring and having a million companies. Just be smart about how you do it. This is risk mitigation. Assess the risk and figure out how you're going to place it so that every facet of your life, and we tend to refer to this as buckets, like buckets of water. You have one bucket in the center, which is you filled up with water, right? And now this is it, it's all there. And all the creditors know the bucket is there, and when they're looking for something, they go in and they start emptying this bucket. What we're trying to promote is take all the water that you have and separate it across multiple buckets. So like this, it's not just in one place. You'll always have water. Even if one thing goes wrong and that bucket gets empty, you'll still have all the other buckets. And from a financial perspective, what you really want is this center bucket of yours to be empty. You don't want much in your own personal estate. There's no value to that. If your businesses are actual functioning businesses, let them make the money. Run certain expenses through it. Your personal things can even be done through a trust. So, and we'll go through this in a bit more detail, but things like family trusts and property trusts are ideal for that, because they can safeguard all these assets without you ever having to expose them, because they're in your personal name. And there's a huge tax issue that comes to this, and I mean, that's normally the hook, is the amount of money you end up paying in tax when you pass away is astronomical. So, I mean, if for nothing else, you probably want to structure around that. But from a protection perspective, it's exactly that. Why have it in your own name if you can have it in a business? And this is where the differentiation comes between the three different vehicles. So I'm guessing that if anyone's following this conversation, that first one's a big no-no, right? Like, if you're not, we might need to go back and just chat about this a little bit. So we're looking at these two. And this is normally where the question pops up and goes, yes, Bruno, thank you so much. I knew we needed structuring. Everything you said made sense. But now, do I buy in a company or a trust, right? It's not an either-or question. You're going to land up having to use a combination of these. Why? A trust in South African law is pretty much the only vehicle that has the ultimate asset protection, because you no longer own these assets at all. You're basically handing it over to somebody completely different, and that trust, so even if you're a trustee, it's the trust that owns it. Now, why this is different from a company is if you put things in a company, you're still a shareholder. So being a shareholder, so if you have a property in a company worth R1 million, and you're the sole shareholder of this company, you've got shares worth R1 million for all intents and purposes. So that's not really giving any differentiation or distinction between yourself and your business. It's just sitting in the company. You're not protecting. You're not protecting yourself because those shares are exposed. So what we typically suggest, and this is what we normally call like the foundation model, is if you want to invest in assets that do appreciate over time, that have income coming in on a monthly basis, and they're high value assets, that if you leave to your children, it's going to cost money to move them. Because remember, every time you move a property, you pay transfer duty. Every time, and I mean, you'll touch on the tax consequences of moving properties when you pass away. You want to put it in something that just carries on in perpetuity. So when you pass away, all that literally happens to you when, with the trust is your name gets scratched off as a beneficiary and a trustee, and your kids just get put on. And it continues like nothing happened, right? So the trust is the only vehicle that offers that level of protection, because you're handing it over to somebody else. If you then want to use the company, you can. You can buy the property in the company, provided that the trust owns the shares. And this is, again, why we speak of the foundation structure. So you typically have a family trust, for example, that would hold all your personal assets. You'd have then a trading trust that takes a bit more risk, goes out, buys properties, that sort of thing, or that owns shares in the company buying the properties. And you keep these separate, because the one is safety and the other one is risk. And by dividing them, you can still have companies, and these companies can own properties, own shares, own whatever they need to own. And we'll touch on like a little structure later that you can see examples of this.
I thought you would have told them that family trust is to finance soft life.
Do you like the sovereign?
Soft
yeah.
life.
Yeah. So this is the
Tax efficient.
this big one.
Okay. Now, how do I put this? Let me put it this way. You made money in your lifetime. You created wealth, you had a coach, you listened to N2, you invested with Louis, and Louis doesn't even invest over $1 million because he's running away from transfer duty, so that he can maximize the returns, isn't it? Didn't you notice that Louis had investing in less than $1 million? Why? Yeah, exactly. Anyway, he could have invested in 1.2 and still got the same return, right? But then you would have paid more transfer duty. So it's better to invest in less than $1 million and still get the same return, isn't it?
You can find them.
Exactly. Okay, now, let's say you invested with Louis and others, you made money in your personal name for that matter. Let me tell you some of the good news because you're a social entrepreneur. You know, you've got a good heart, you want hospitals, you want those things. Now, what's going to happen is that there's what we call wealth tax. Wealth tax basically is different types of taxes that taxes wealth. Right? So, creating wealth in property, your wealth, right? One form of wealth tax when you die is what we call an estate duty. Right? An estate duty is a tax that you pay when you die. So anything above 3.5, which as a property investor is hanging around Louis, the chances are you're going to have 10 million by the end of the year, isn't it? Are you not promising them that? Right, no, which means that you will be already above 3.5 million, which means anything between that is going to SARS 20% should anything happen, God forbid, should anything happen to you at the end of that 12 months. 20% of that goes to SARS because of wealth tax, what we call wealth tax. And it goes back to what remember he gave you guys the structures. But I'm telling you that should you not go there, this is what's going to happen to you. At least be aware. Now, there's one of the in the income tax provisions and one of those fancy legislations, they name them to just create a confusion. Right. There's what we call a schedule. That's how you were asking me about the capital gain tax earlier. Right? And I told you what? You wanna teach them? Okay, let me forgive you tonight. So now next time you're gonna have to teach them. So now there's what we call capital gain tax, right? Because when you die, it's what we call deemed provision event. It's an event that created a deemed provision. Basically what they're saying is that when you die, you actually sold your properties. It treats as what we call capital gain tax. Yeah, it's there.
And you pay estate duty and capital gains.
Welcome. So now, yeah. So be aware. Right now, so let's assume because you hang around with Andrew, you hang around with Louis, you're wealthy, your marginal high tax rate is 45%, boom. And then there's what we call inclusionary. Inclusionary, which means that the capital gain that you pay, only specific percentage of it is tax, which in your case, as a natural person, is 40%, isn't it? But then you are one of those high net worth individuals selling cocktails in Camps Bay, you know what I mean? You live in soft life, you know, posting on social Instagram. It's all good, right? And you're a high marginal tax rate payer. You're sitting at 45%. Take 45, multiply by 40%. How much is it? I'm not good at maths. That's why I ran away from accounting and I went to tax. Because I can just lie there. You know? So now, how much is it? 18%. So add that. 18 plus 20, 38 of your wealth, because your number is out. You left the planet Earth. Then 38% of your wealth that you went so hard traveling all those small towns of these places and creating wealth in property space, 38% of it is gone. gone because you just didn't structure things. By the way, I haven't even included the family feuds. You know that meeting that because you also died without a will now. You know what I mean? That's why he's sitting there, he's waiting there. The family members argue, the master is sitting here, he's saying, okay, which executor we have to appoint to administer the executive. That one is saying, no, it's my father. That one is said, no, he's my father from the previous marriage, and the son is sitting here. He said, once you are done, guys, I want 38%. And then your property values is going out, down, and Louis sitting there is like, I'm looking for below market value. That's a reality. That's a reality. Now, can you see? Pretty much 100% of your wealth is gone. And he worked so hard. You have been sitting with Shiliboy here listening to Shiliboy lying to you. It's gone. Your wealth is gone. Just because you didn't structure your things, your affairs. I haven't even here, Intelligent will be happy. By the way, we do this yesterday administration. So I'll charge you that 4%. I'll be sitting there looking, eyeing at Mr. Master. Listen, we're competent. We can administer. Right? Then they'll give me 4%. It's the law. Add that to the 8. How much is it? 42. I'm pushing. Let me stop here. Let me not even scale you further. Because that's a reality. That's the current legal framework that we are faced with as South Africans, right? And they're having talks, by the way, to increase it.
Yeah?
Yeah, because we are one of the highest what? They call them what? Those fancy English words, right? Yeah, we are one of the high in the world when it comes to the wealth gap. So now what do you do to please the left wing? Right? Remember, these are politics and national treasury, but let's not dwell into that. But that's a reality, that's a talk that is out there. So what do you do as a property investor who listens, who invests time and sitting at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock listening to Shilibo? You need to take action. And to say it, you can have the education, you can listen to me. But if you don't take action, you might as well go and sleep. It's a reality. So you take action and then you make sure that you don't find yourself in this. Because he spoke about transferring wealth. And I was actually expecting a question to say, you're talking about family trust. What's the point of family trust? What are the benefits for that? Yeah, I teased it, I said soft line, but in reality, it's one of the best instruments on how to move wealth from yourself to the next generation. How best are you going to do that? Do you know, by just distributing from a family trust and distributing the money and donating to your kids as beneficiaries, it's tax exempt. They will never tell you that. It's a reality. It's one of the, I think this is one of the things that I shouldn't even be telling you. You understand? That's how you're going to try. How are you going to transfer wealth from yourself to the next generation? How? That's a reality. Anyway, you wanna?
So just a heads up on this whole 33% of your estate going and like getting paid and disposed of in costs. Remember, if you're buying the properties, for example, in the company, and you're still the shareholder in your personal name, this still applies. So the only way to bypass this is exactly what you were saying. It's by using the trust model. The company alone isn't going to bypass this at all.
The trust owns the company, yeah.
Yeah, because that's the shareholder, not you.
Can you set these things up after the fact?
After you own.
Can we? We're running out of time, and I see the eyes of Andrew. So yeah, so let's quickly finish, and then we'll take questions. 30 minutes outside, we can have fun. Anyway, this I normally call it Prince Charles and Meghan. What? Princess Meghan? It's Meghan. Oh, Harry and Meghan. Yeah. Oh, you can tell that I'm on the other side. So anyway, I've got Prince Harry and Princess, right? Anyway, never mind. Okay, here's the thing. We're excited. You make money. These are properties. Quickly. Now, you're a high-end income earner, right? Someone asked me, how do I move money, right? And how do I minimize paying SARS? Write it down. This is one of those privileges of being here. Okay. Now, If you've got properties here and you're owning rental income, you are owning it in your personal name, right? And you want to give the soft life to your kids because are one of those who have expensive taste in extramural activities. You want to give them here. You must firstly greet Commissioner here. He wants his peace. Legislation empowered him. It's a reality.
Yeah.
Remember, you must be taxed first. And then it goes here. You are high-end earners, right? Then meaning that your tax is higher. You already earn high salary, which means you're going to be taxed at high marginal rate here. Then you can only give your kids post-tax income. What if I told you there's a way around this? Now, please, hear me. I'll get arrested here. Okay, now, what if I say to you, he mentioned, remember that gentleman who said, usufruct, bad dominion, and all those things? And you might ask me and say, Shilibe, but listen, the properties are already in my personal name. How do I do that? Doesn't work once, but we can talk about it somewhere, maybe on a master class. Come to the boot camp. It's boot camp. There's a boot camp, right? I'll explain how we're going to move that on the usufruct, because it's going to take us the whole day. We need enough time. The usufruct and bad dominions. You can do that. Now, you can easily move the property here and then make your trust fund babies beneficiaries, and then they get money. By the way, they don't earn any income. Which means what? And then remember, one of the benefits in South Africa, because they have to satisfy the left wing. It's politics. It's politics. Anyway, left wing meaning that they need to care for those guys who are lower income earners, right? There's what we call tax threshold of about 87,000 per initial person. So if your kids are not social media sensational and then they're not earning those high income, which means that they can actually still benefit here from that country pie principle. It's a common law, it's codified, it's an income tax act. You can take advantage of it, right? So which means that your kids are going to get money without even paying SARS. You just need to make sure that your record keeping is solid. You just need to make sure that your independent trustees understand what they're doing. Because one of the things that makes trust a bit more complex is the record keeping. And someone said you guys are not good with record keeping, but I hope by tonight you'll start being very good. Right? So this is what we call conduit pipe principle. You can actually take advantage of this. And it goes back to that thing at the end of the day. When you're structuring a tax efficiency, I'll ask you a simple question. Why do you want to invest in property? Because he, and her will never be the same. So it might be short term, it might be long term, it might be medium term. So every transaction that you're going to enter into, it will probably have certain criteria and objectives. And if we know, we're able to tell you where to park this. That's why we always say the fundamental structures that we can even actually give it to you, whether it's through trust and a company, you can all have them by the end of the night. But how you're going to use them will never be the same. Because your circumstances will never be the same with his. So you need to understand that. We can agree that the best structure, he explains, a lawyer, he explained it. But when you come to me with the structures, I'll look at it, it's just a paper cut there and say, what's going on? Why are you investing with me? And if you're not telling me the truth, I won't be able to help you to solve these taxes.
So
right?
A very common question that we get, and this everyone always asks this. Accountants have always told people that trusts are very expensive, right? That's 45%, and a lot of accountants, even with property investors, they go to their accountants, they ask, should I do it in a trust? The accountant goes, no, never do it in a trust. It's 45%, it's ridiculous. They're not, first of all, not all accountants are tax practitioners, just bear that in mind. They understand how to file tax returns, they don't understand the technical nature of tax, and they certainly don't understand the need for asset protection, right? The reality is, and that yes, trusts are very expensive. They get taxed at 45%, but that's not how you're going to use the trust. You're going to make use of other mechanisms. So you can buy in the property that's owned by the trust. In the company that's owned by the trust, then the company is the one paying tax. You just have the trust there for asset protection. In this specific example, if the property is owned directly by the trust, you're not trying to keep the money in the trust and paying 45%, you're distributing it, right? And the law says once you distribute it, you pay it at the beneficiary's tax rate, which in this case are children that don't pay tax. So you're not getting taxed at 45%. That 45% does not go away. You're just bypassing.
Did you just bash accountants in front of me? Oh, wow. No way. Jeez, this guy is horrible.
Guys, are we finishing at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning?
5.
No, just checking.
Oh,
I didn't get to sing it.
Oh, wow. They're still awake.
No, this is what we're waiting for.
Oh, wow. You're outvoted in democracy.
Oh, this is the chat.
Wow. What is this? Family trust, shared trust, special trust, SPV trust, property trust, all trust. Confused, right? We shouldn't be. Why do you need a family trust? We're already time up, right? So we need to finish up. 2 minutes.
Lord.
Yeah.
The actual question.
It's a rhetoric. So now, I talk a lot. Yeah, it's another way of processing. So now, why do you need a family trust? He spoke of family trust, he spoke of property trust. And I said, we're going to transfer wealth in a more tax efficient way. And one of the beautiful things, like I said, if you've got this capital that is parked in that family trust, and you've got little ones that are about to start their own journey, right? They say we're procreating as human beings, right?
Yeah.
There we go. So now, how do they go on their own? How do you distribute this wealth in a more tax efficient way? Trust is one of the tools that are still privileged in that sense that it can donate that capital quotient that is sitting there. That wealth. Remember, capital, like I'm talking about the money that is the wealth that is sitting in that family trust. It can donate without paying donation tax, which means that you can even donate for these kids, and then you just need, if they want to stay in Australia, America, because mobility is high these days, then what happens? Then you can actually effectively what? Make your kids global citizens. And then they just need to disclose that to Reserve Bank and boom, gone. But they need to balance of payment. Now, he spoke of personal assets. One of the, I'm going to give you guys tax hacks, basically. If you're not writing down your own, I'm not going to repeat after this. One of the things that people do, and I was actually speaking to one of the guys, India, yesterday, and she told me that she has a life policy. And the life policy, one of the things that is stipulated there was upon her death, they will do what we call testamentary trust for her kids. Oh, sounds good. Here's a question I posed to her. Do you even know who are going to be appointed as trustees? Right? She doesn't know. She won't be there. Okay, cool. Do you even know how long it's going to take to register that called testamentary trust? Right? Remember, we're talking about preservation of wealth, guys. The one that you're going to work hard with Andrew and Will Lewis, Michael Owen is going to teach you guys about credit. But how do you even preserve it? How do you even move it in a more tax efficient way? Remember, all these things come back to tax. Right? How do you even do that? Why can't you create a family trust? You know the independent trustees, you know the trustees, you've even tested them during your living. So that upon your death, when this life policy payout comes out, it goes straight there to a living trust. Why do you even want to wait and create a testament? You don't even know how long it's going to take at the master. What about your kids' well-being during that time? Because remember, they're going to freeze it. The pension funds and everyone there, they're going to freeze it until the trust is registered. God knows how long. If we have, at some point, we experienced a situation where trust took like 9 months, 12 months. COVID showed us. So why don't you take, by the way, there's also benefits, tax benefits for that. So all the contribution of your life policies, if they were paid by the family trust, will compound them with inflation adjusted, I think around the 6% right now that we're using. And then we'll deduct it against the payout. So meaning that less tax paid on there as they do. But they don't tell you that. You pay less tax value. Right. So exactly, that's many. So those are some of the benefits that comes with family trust. Right? You might also want to be looking at investing into things like after tax payout investment, like shares and things, just to diversify a little bit. Right? It's a reality. That's what I always say, it's a sovereign wealth fund, it's a cornerstone, it's a wealth of the family. The wealth cornerstone of the family. When you talk of the wealth of the family, you refer to a family trust.
And it's vital, and the thing with the family trust is it's vital that you actually ring fence the assets that you have that are unencumbered. Because if you have cash, for example, and you put it into this family trust, ideally you want to keep this family trust away from any risk. So you'll have other trusts, and they'll even be involved, possibly sign as sureties, get involved in commercial transactions, own properties that have bonds registered over them. That's great. No issue with that. But you don't want the money that you're putting into the family trust every month to get touched by anyone. And that's why we refer to the multiple vehicles here. Just so you guys understand this diagram though, this isn't necessarily how a structure has to look like. This is dependent on the person. Some people might have all of these, some people might just have one. Typically it's underpinned by the family trust, but you'd find that entry-level foundation investor would go family trust, property trust, maybe a holding company and they trade there, or they put the properties directly in the trust. And those are alternatives to each other. As you start getting more advanced, you start playing around with things and you start increasing the investment structure or increasing the scope of the investment structure. But underpinning all of this is your family trust, which is safe. It doesn't get touched, no money is owed to it, there's no loan accounts, it just lives in perpetuity, and when you pass away, then it gets scratched off, and that's it. And that's literally the impact of your death on that family trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to go to bed by like midnight.
I think it's enough for the night.
Was that good, ladies and gents? Turn to the person next to you, just give them a high five and say, Shirley Boy and Bruno are great. A big high five. Can you make spending some real one-to-one time with them? Would that be useful? Absolutely.
You're waiting for them to go.
Yeah, exactly. It's 20 past 10. So what I'll do, just as a reminder, because obviously this is the end of the night, did you all get value from tonight?
Yeah.
Did you all learn something? Give yourselves a round of applause. Well done. So just as a reminder, I've added something for you, by the way, during the break. Remember I told you the value was 13,000 of that package? You're adding 2,200 from Entergen. The value is 15,258. And what they've said, is it on there? Is that it's still the same price, but they're throwing in a full, for both of them, two of them, into a full one-off session, not the basic that they offer at Entergen, the advanced. So Shirley Boy and Bruno looked at your personal situation. We're including that in the 799. For those of you that do want to get involved, even if you're on the flipping course already, you can swap it out. Just speak to Dave or speak to Simone outside the room, and they will look after you. Is that okay with everyone, ladies and gents? A round of applause for me. Thanks, Andrew, for coming to Cape Town. Pleasure. Going to a wine farm tomorrow, so it's okay. And that's the end of the night, ladies and gents. So feel free to network for about 10-20 minutes. We'll be around to answer any questions, and I Shirley Boy will be around. Bruno.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, completely forgot.
Sure.
We are running a special on the foundation model. So what we spoke about, the family trust and business trust. with a company will, and consultation, so we'll look at marital regime, have a chat about that. So typically all of these come together like about, I think, 20, 21,000, somewhere around there. 15K, if you guys just pop us an email tonight, let us know you were here and you want to get the ball rolling with it, and then we can process it early next week, if you can.
Cool. Thanks very much, Bruno.
Separate to from
This is the point where it's
ensure that the structure coverage
like as you ever do was enough to penalize you selling shares. So you still have to pay. But my understanding worst case so now we're going to find so even if that becomes a problem, then the best solution then is to so for example, figuring out I would get So integer is separate to the firm. So integer itself is the branding. All the times we take on so we run your time portfolio.
They just, yeah, so you need to have a strong bond just so
So I would love to find out an answer to that question, but it's really not.
I know I fix answer it, but because that's what the price is. But I experience that
But this will give you all the support you need as a student wants to do his passion, diving, so you'll get that.
Okay, so